The HMS Erebus set sail from England in the 19th century in search of the fabled Northwest Passage. All souls on board perished, but they were by no means forgotten. The search for their ship wrapped up just 4 years ago. It's a gripping tale told afresh by none other than Michael Palin. His new book is called Erebus: One Ship, Two Epic Voyages, and the Greatest Naval Mystery of All Time. And it brings this documentarian, author, and founding member, of course, of Monty Python's Flying Circus back to our studio after a 5-year absence. It's so good to see you again.
I've missed you, Steve. I have missed you so much.
I can tell.
I've been waiting outside, you know, I would wave as you go in the morning.
You seem broken up about the whole thing.
Well, I'll get over it.
This actually dovetails nicely to my first question, because for a guy who's made his living for such a long time being funny, there's nothing funny about this story. You've chosen to tell one of the most tragic naval stories ever. How come?
Well, I like stories, you know, and I like comedy. If you like comedy, you also like the other side that makes the tension in a story. And actually, the decision I made a decision to tell the story of the ship because part of it was the catastrophic disaster that was the Franklin expedition. The other part was a highly successful 4-year expedition to the Antarctic just before that.
We'll talk about both.
Yeah, you know, you know, I was seeing the sort of the lighter side and the darker side, and also I was kind of, you know, I look for humour because humour is what keeps people going in adversity in a lot of these instances. And so, you know, I was looking through letters and when I was doing my research, trying to find anything that had a little glimpse of humour or lightness of touch, and of course there was quite a lot of that.
There was indeed, and let's tell some of the story. Actually, since you point out that this ship has been almost everywhere, Sheldon, you want to bring this graphic up? You can see on the monitor up here. I mean, this is from your book, so you know it. It all started in the UK, and then look at the voyage this vessel took. We're talking in the 1820s, 30s, 40s. It went absolutely all over the place. What was its original mission, though?
Well, the ship was built in 1826 in Wales as a bomb ship. It was a naval warship, made very sort of diagonal planking, very strong hull, and they used to put mortars on those ships, and they would bombard towns under siege with a lot of noise and you know,
the Star-Spangled
flame
Banner.
and smoke and all that. Yes, one of the bomb ships actually. I think was that the Siege of Baltimore or something like that. That's right. Star-Spangled Banner has a reference to British bomb ships.
The bombs bursting in air are from this kind of ship.
You remember it better than I do.
I learned that from reading your book. Why did that mission change?
Because there were no wars to fight, really. In 1826, the Napoleonic Wars had ended, and it was one of those long, comparatively 30 years of peace. And the ships were then a real attempt to try and understand the Earth and how it worked, and the science of it, how it worked, and its magnetic forces and all that. All these things that people felt after the Enlightenment could tell us about how to lead better lives, how to civilize the world. This was the big thing at the time. And so Erebus was chosen because it was a tough, strengthened ship to be the first ship to go to the Antarctic.
Well, let's pick up on that. Expedition. Why was the Royal Navy first of all, it was the Erebus and its companion ship, the Terror.
Yes, it was.
And they went together to the Antarctic. How come?
Yeah, because the Admiralty in England thought that they should go and investigate the Antarctic, and there were various unknowns, and at that period in time they didn't like unknowns anymore. They wanted to know about the Earth, and no one knew whether the Antarctic existed even. Captain Cook had just got there, some whaling captains had been down, but the Erebus expedition under Sir James Clark Ross was charged with finding out everything they could, not just about the Antarctic, but all about the islands around it. And they found out amazing things. They found out that the Antarctic was a continent. They found out that there was this 100-foot high ice barrier, which they called the Southern Ice Barrier, now the Ross Ice Shelf. They discovered that. They discovered a volcano in the middle of Antarctica, and they circumnavigated the continent. I mean, it was an amazingly successful and intrepid expedition for a ship that only had sail power. You know, it was a small ship, you know, like about 35 meters long, and
what size crew?
It's about 67 people.
I want to ask about that because 67 people on board a ship for missions that occasionally lasted for years.
Yes.
You talk about the boredom, you talk about the lack of human contact, claustrophobic quarters, well, with one exception in the book where you talk about a trip to Rio, no contact with the opposite sex pretty much at all, eating the same food. How did they manage to survive under such conditions?
I really don't know. I mean, this is, one has to use a bit of one's imagination. Or you can read their letters, but there are not many letters from the crew, you know. The officers, you know how the officers survived? They had rather comfortable time. They could bring their own food. They could bring Fortnum and Mason hampers from London and dispense wine and all that. But for the non-commissioned people in their hammocks at night and all that, it was just work all the time. This is how they survived. They were always at work, sort of furling, unfurling the sails, cleaning the ship, holystoning the decks to make them smooth, all that. So the idea was that they worked all the time. But there are moments when they were stuck completely in the ice, like on New Year's Day, 1842, and they weren't going anywhere. The two ships were stuck fast. And you think, you know, it must have been the most horrendous situation to be in. But instead they had a party, you know, and they go out and they carve an 8-foot-long woman out of the ice. I love that. Obviously they were missing something after so many years away. And then they cut out a dance floor. They got some musical instruments. They had a band. They made a pub, and they just had they were in extremis, but they had fun. And they served ice creams. That was what I loved, you know.
Well, they had fun some of the time, but they got flogged other times, right? This was nasty business.
Yeah, there was not too much flogging on James Clark Ross and Franklin, the two captains of Erebus, were not great floggers. There were some captains who used flogging very sort of, liberal is the wrong word, but, you know, regularly.
And surprisingly, I think you tell us sailors were not taught how to swim on purpose. Why would that be?
Because I think the idea was that if you learnt to swim, that was a sign that you may need to swim, and this was a sign of lack of confidence in going to sea and the ship itself. It was a sign of there might be failure. And this was a big thing at the time. The whole Franklin expedition was, you could say, in many ways, didn't take into account that it could fail. So the swimming was one thing, but other things they did, like, you know, they would be unfurling the sails and climbing this rigging with temperatures of minus 30 degrees, and they wouldn't wear gloves because they might slip, so they had to use their bare hands. Why they didn't all suffer serious frostbite, I honestly don't know. So something must have been run well on those ships.
Why does somebody sign up for that kind of mission in the first place?
Well, it was glamorous at the time, in a way. You know, you get double pay. You were part of something that was quite exciting. It was like, I suppose, the space race or something like that, being involved in sending a rocket up into space. And you are chosen. There used to be press gangs which got people off the streets and put them on the warships. But after the Napoleonic Wars, you were free to be chosen. They were all volunteers. And some of them had a great spirit of adventure, and they knew they were sailing with a good captain, had a great record. So, you know, so some people felt, let's go with it. This is an adventure. I want an adventure.
I have to assume at some point during the course of your writing this book, you put yourself in the place and asked yourself, how would I have hacked all of that?
Yes.
And what answer did you come up with?
I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, I can understand, you know, on the good days, I love to be on the deck. I love the idea of being on board ship, even a rough sea. I don't mind rough seas. But the intense cold and the cramped quarters for months and months on end, I just don't know how I'd have dealt with it. And I'm a bit of a softie, so I'd have probably been worried about the men in their hammocks having a hard time and all that. Come on, come and join us, have a glass of wine. The captain would have said, no way. That's not the way we do it. So I think I'd have been a bit of a sucker there.
Here's a bit of a quote from the book. These were men of intelligence and intellectual curiosity, stimulated by the spirit of the Enlightenment, to search and discover, to push back the boundaries of knowledge, convinced that the more they measured and traced and calculated and recorded, the more beneficial it would be for mankind. But this sense of purpose also contained within it an implicit sense of superiority, which, when misused, fed the dark side of Britain's increasing self-confidence. What's that dark side you're referring to there?
I don't think it was just an arrogance, a feeling that you had won the sort of debate about how the world should be run, that civilization was something that the British, and not just the British, I think Europe and the West generally, bestowed on the rest of the world. It ignored the rights of local people, tribal people very often. It just was a sense of being right, which I think is always, I don't think that's a good thing, really. I mean, you can have a sense of belief in what you're doing, but I think you have to listen to all sides of the argument, and they weren't doing that at the time.
Well, the sun never did set on Her Majesty's empire once upon a time.
No, it didn't once upon a time. When it did set, you know, that's
it really set. Yes, it really did.
A long period of darkness.
Yes.
But no.
These ships, though, were not just looking for land. There was also a lot of scientific work being done.
Yeah.
For example?
Well, they were very fascinated at the time by understanding the magnetic forces that underneath the Earth's surface. It was a science that people knew a little bit about. James Clark Ross, who was the captain of Erebus in the Antarctic, had actually reached the North Magnetic Pole in 1831. He wanted to find the South Magnetic Pole. There were lots of people who felt if they could map the terrestrial magnetism of the Earth, then they would have virtually a kind of GPS system for the Victorian period. It would be much easier to navigate. Measurements would be much more precise. And this was a big motive for the Antarctic expedition. The rest was, charting the flora and fauna, making maps. This was part of the world there were no maps. I mean, nowadays we're just so used to having charts everywhere, or maps, or whatever, Google searches. But then they were going to places where they had to make the maps themselves as they went along. Quite exciting, but also, I would imagine, disorienting and a bit terrifying at times.
Well, as you point out, they went to the bottom of the globe and then they went to the top of the globe.
Yeah.
And that's the Canadian part of the story. They did want to find the Northwest Passage through Canada's high Arctic. What was the imperative of doing that?
There was a sort of, there was a commercial imperative which had been followed for about 200 or 300 years since Elizabethan times, that if you could find your way through the Northwest Passage, connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific, you could get to China, you could get to the Indies, all the fabled sort of wealth of those areas would be much easier to transport back. And you wouldn't have to go around the Cape of Good Horn, which was anyway controlled by the Spaniards and all that. So it was really, there was a commercial motive that this could bring untold benefits if you were able to get through. At the time, I think it was just, they felt they could do it. And they tried for many, many years. No one had cracked it. They got within 150, 200 miles of going through the passage, but no one had been able to crack it. And there was a certain confidence there after the Antarctic journey. We have the ships, we have the men, we have the science, we have the skill. Now we're going to do it, and we're going to do it before the Americans and the Russians, who are very active up there, of course.
And we're going to do it with a 59-year-old captain named John Franklin.
Yes.
Why him?
Because his wife was extremely ambitious for him. And John Franklin had, to his credit, he'd been a successful Arctic explorer. He was known popularly in the English press as the man who ate his boots, because he had been on one land expedition. They'd run out of food, and they ate their clothing and shoes and God knows what. So he was known as the man who ate his boots. He hadn't had a great distinguished naval career since then, but John Clark Ross, the man who took them to the Antarctic, had decided he'd had enough of sailing in difficult and dangerous waters. He didn't want to do it. And Lady Jane Franklin said, my husband's here. He's sailed a lot. He may be 59 years old, but he's experienced.
Well, that's the thing. 59 is getting up there for this kind of a mission.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the next oldest member of the crew was 46 years old. And the average age of the people on Erebus was 28 years old. So, he was well above the limit.
Did he manage to find the Northwest Passage?
Well, Lady Jane Franklin again would say yes, he did. Mm-hmm. He didn't, in fact, because he died. We know he died. We know pretty much the exact date he died in 1847, when the ships had been stuck in the ice for 18 months, unable to move, and they abandoned the ships. Franklin had died on board the ship. Some of the men who went south did cross there's a narrow strait called the Simpson Strait, and they died on the other shore, on the Canadian shore. And so the Simpson Strait was one way of getting through the Northwest Passage. So she managed to say that her husband's expedition had discovered the Northwest Passage, which is quite different from sailing through it, which is what they meant. Mm-hmm. They intended to do. It wasn't no one sailed through it until Amundsen sailed through it in 1904.
Now, again, one of the truly harrowing parts of reading the book is you put us there. You put us in the heads of these guys who are stuck in this ice month after month after month, and who must surely know they're all going to die. They must surely know they're not going to make it. Help us understand all that.
Well, you see, I don't really know. I mean, once they were in the ice, there's not a lot of information. There are no diaries and no papers. One just has to speculate on what happened. I mean, the thing was that the ships were very, very well equipped. They had everything. They had 2,000 books. They had sort of carpenter's tools for people to apprentice carpentry. They had musical instruments. They had, you know, an enormous amount that was supposed to keep them occupied during those dark winters. And so in my head, I wonder at what point did all that become useless? Did they say, this is, you know, not getting us anywhere? I think there was a lot of optimism. The officers certainly had a lot of optimism when they started. There was a feeling that as the summer broke, the ice was going to break up, as it usually did, and they'd be able to find their way through. And the first summer, the ice didn't break up. The second summer comes along, the ice doesn't break up again. At that point, I mean, I'm sure people must have been terrified and been fearing for their lives.
Any sense of how the captain would have come to terms with the reality of this situation, given he was a great God-fearing man, sermons on the ship, no swearing allowed on the boat? You know,
I think the God-fearing man is the key phrase. I think he would have said, we must keep praying, God will deliver us. They were Victorians, very strong religious beliefs, fostered by the captain, so I'm sure they were sort of praying a lot and believing that God would deliver them. Yeah, that must have been one of the ways that kept them going.
At a certain point, England realizes this ship is missing. And they send, in total, I think, 36 missions, you tell us, to go find the Franklin expedition. And obviously they never did. But they did find some things. What did they find?
Well, they found a number of, they found evidence that the Inuit, the local people, had been in contact with either survivors or people from the expedition. They found a medal from which Franklin had.
We're showing it right here.
Oh, great. Yes, there we are. The medal, there's a prayer book, there's a medical kit, a chronometer. So they had discovered, obviously, the Inuit had discovered some of the men. What the Inuit also said they discovered was that there had been cannibalism. The men had sort of had to eat their comrades to stay alive. They found mutilated bodies, they found pots with bones in, they found marks on the bones which seemed to indicate there had been cannibalism. So this was the big news that came back to London in 1854, which was 9 years after the expedition disappeared.
How did Franklin's wife take those ideas of cannibalism?
Well, absolute shock, horror, total denial. She got Charles Dickens, who was a sort of friend. She was a great lobbyist. She lobbied the, you know, when Franklin went missing, she lobbied the American president, Zachary Taylor. She lobbied the Tsar of Russia, anyone who could help. And she got Charles Dickens to react to this awful news about cannibalism. He said, how could these brave men, these British sailors, you know, be discredited by people with a sort of a love of blood and blubber? I mean, it was a horrible outburst against the Inuit, saying these are savages, and that was the denial. In fact, they've been proved right later on through history, as they were in many instances. The Inuit were not kind of really taken seriously because it was an oral tradition rather than a written tradition.
She sounds, though, Lady Franklin sounds like an incredibly strong woman. You tell us she refused to wear black. She did not take a widow's pension because she just refused to acknowledge that her husband was dead. So she was a force.
She was a force. I mean, she's a very key figure in this whole thing. I mean, without her, I don't think Franklin would probably have led the expedition. They might have got a younger man, things might have been different. Ironically, she was the first to worry about the fact they hadn't heard from them in 2 years. She had the first intimations of disaster, and probably guilt because she'd pushed him into it. But at the end, yes, she raised statues in London. She made sure there was, by subscription, there was a bust in Westminster Abbey. Tennyson, whose niece had, you know, married Franklin's niece or something like that. He wrote a verse and all that. So she made sure her husband took the full credit. And I think that's not very unfair to all the, the other people on the expedition, really. I mean, they got very little credit, the people who worked hard just to keep those ships going.
She had a little artistic license taken with his statue, I gather.
Yes, yeah.
Doesn't quite look like him.
No, it looks a bit like Brad Pitt, sort of in his younger years, instead of a 60-year-old man with bad big digestive problems
big paunch
and a big
like
paunch.
that.
Yeah, he lost a lot of weight, certainly, on this statue.
I mean, to the extent that that the public following this story, they will remember this image. This is really quite a harrowing image.
Ah, yes.
John Torrington, member of the expedition, buried in what is present-day Nunavut.
Yeah.
All these years later, we're talking, what are we now, 170 years since the ship disappeared. Are you any closer to understanding how they actually died?
Well, no, there are many, many theories. People still, I've got a feeling that it was reasonably simple to describe how they died, which was that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. There were two very, very fierce winters. I mean, the worst weather they'd had in decades, which is why the ice never melted in the summer and allowed them out. And I think by the end, probably scurvy had set in. But you just showed the picture of John Torrington. There were 3 graves that were exhumed, and they found high levels of lead in the blood of all these people. And for a long time, people felt it was the lead sealing in the cans of food that they were given that had killed these 3 and probably the rest of the crew. And yet it doesn't really add up, because they found out that everyone in Victorian England would have had very high levels of lead in their bones and their blood, because all the plumbing and all the pipes were lead. And also, they died in the first 6 months of the expedition, and no one else died for another 2 years. So it doesn't sound as though the food was necessarily the culprit.
The mystery persists.
The mystery persists. I mean, that's why it's such a great story. People are out there, even now, forensic scientists analysing bone fragments.
Well, of course, when this happened, Canada wasn't yet Canada.
No.
But this is I mean, you said it in the book, this is very much a Canadian story today. How come?
I think that really the British interest lasted throughout the search until about 1870, and then they just gave up, accepted it was a failure, a disaster, forget it, move on. I think for Canadians, it was a Canadian archaeologist who did exhume these bodies, discovered John Torrington, brought the theory of the lead levels, and from that moment on, and actually for a few years before, it was Canadians who were leading the search, who were fascinated by what had happened on their territory. And I think the great thing was in 2008, when your Prime Minister decided to make it a major priority for the country.
This was Stephen Harper at the
Stephen
time.
Harper, to try and find the ships, if they were there. And I'm told there were sort of political reasons as well, about sovereignty of those islands right up in the north, who owns the sea in the Northwest Passage.
We did want to tell the Russians and the Americans to keep their noses out of our business.
Well, it was all that.
Part
It
of it.
certainly was. It was after the Russians had planted a flag on the seabed under the North Pole. Everybody got a little bit sort of tense. Hey, come on, what are we going to do? So I think that was the Canadian government's response. And they did, your government did put a lot of money into the search, but nothing was found for 6 years, with all the best equipment in the world. And in the end, the way they found the ship was just by accident. It just happened to be somebody.
Let's tell that story, because in 2014, again, people will remember the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, going on television, surprise announcement. We found it. Who do you give the actual credit to for finding the Erebus down there?
Well, it's a great, that's a very good one. I've got to be very careful what I say, because I know a lot of these guys. I know Ryan Harris and Jonathan Moore, who were the two who first saw it on a screen. But there's a guy called Andrew Sterling. He was a helicopter pilot. He happened to be working on an island nearby. He dropped off the archaeologist who was looking around. He walked around the shore, found a big piece of iron equipment, didn't know what it was, showed it to the archaeologist. The archaeologist said, "This has come off a ship, and it's a heavy piece of material. The ship must be very nearby." And within 2 days, they found the ship on the ocean floor. So Andrew Sterling, the guy who noticed this piece of equipment, I think deserves a bit of credit.
And of course, the guy who co-founded BlackBerry, Jim Balsillie had a piece in this. Parks Canada had a
Yes,
piece in this.
yeah.
This became really quite a quest, if you like.
Yeah.
And there's the bell.
There's the bell. And once they'd found Erebus, and 2 years later they found Terra, which is, you know, again, provides an enormous amount of potential material to unravel the mystery. That's what it, I mean, it's never been so exciting, I think, as now, to be honest.
Do you want to get down there?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
You really do? You want to put a wetsuit on and you want to get down there?
Yeah, I want to go and sort of caress the hull of this ship I know so much about, and I knew where the oak beams were made from the Forest of Dean, 1820s. The fact they're still there and they're still intact, I think it's just wonderful. I'd love to go down there, but I probably would. I'd probably put my foot through the wrong bit or something like that. Hey, Michael, no, don't touch that. Oh my God, he's done it again. So I wouldn't take a Monty Python member down a ship like that if I were them.
Now, how far down is it?
Not far. It's
right,
about you know, about 36 feet, whatever it is.
Because it's perched on something, right?
Here. It's on the seabed. It's just not. It's not very low. In fact, the masts would have stuck out above the water, and the Inuit knew this and had told people that they'd seen 3 masts sticking out at a certain point. And for a long time they were not believed, and now they're found to have been absolutely accurate.
Now, you have traveled to many of the ports all over the world that the Erebus would have docked in throughout the 1800s. You've been to the Falkland Islands. The Erebus was there. Tasmania, Nunavut, of course. Are there any traces of the vessel's voyage that remain in those locations?
There are traces. I mean, in the Falkland Islands, I could see they'd built trenches in which the ships had to be dragged out of the water and tarred and re-caulked, and they dug trenches into which they put everything on board ship, pulled the ships out of the water, re-tarred their bottoms, as it were, put them back in the water, and then repacked. So you can see that trench. And the most moving thing, there's a lighthouse in Hobart, Tasmania, called Tin Pot Lighthouse, and it's down the river, sort of. As you go south to Antarctica, you would pass Tin Pot Lighthouse. They talk about it in their journals, and it's still there. And I stood in Hobart, and one night, it was a dark night, it was very cold, and I could see Tin Pot Lighthouse still flashing, you know, 160 years on. That's great. That was very moving.
You want that connection to this story, don't you?
Yeah, I feel very sort of close to it, oddly enough. And I mean, the book's been out in England for a while. It's been quite successful. And I found myself becoming very slightly emotional about it. I wanted to tell the guys on the ships, your story's been told, people are interested.
Well, here's what you say in the book. They must not have died in vain.
Yeah.
Why do you think you feel so strongly about this?
Because I think these were, they were doing admirable work, these guys, especially on the first expedition. I'm particularly interested in the ship itself, but the ship needs people to run it, needs people to sail it, and I think they're the quiet heroes, the people who are on board just keeping these ships going in the most intolerable weather and storms up in the rigging in the middle of Atlantic storms and the bitter ice in the north and south polar areas. How they survived, I just don't know, but they did, and I think it's admirable, and I think they should be remembered.
Well, good for you for telling their story.
Oh.
I want to do a bit of a hard turn here because I think people will be very disappointed in me if I don't at least ask you one thing about that former career of yours.
Oh, yeah. Which one was that, I wonder?
Well,
John Cleese's ballet?
Should we put the picture up? I think I'm referring to the career where you would put plaid on and dream about being a lumberjack in Canada and cut down trees and dress up in women's clothing and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Any desire to do any of that again?
Well, it's always an ambition, you know. I think that's been slightly more dangerous than going down and touching Erebus, quite honestly, with the mounted choir behind there. I think they've been very kind to me here about that. In fact, when we went to British Columbia with the Python show and I sang the song, people threw all sorts of mounted equipment on stage and all that, you know, so, yeah.
I think next year is 50 years for Monty Python, isn't it?
It is, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you know, there's going to be intense pressure on you guys to get together to do something.
Yeah.
Do you think you will?
I think we will. the cameras will be in the care home as we have our sort of morning walk, and we will probably sort of, fishes will be slapped.
What did you say in the show you did? Was it 1 down, 5 to go?
That was it, yes, that was.
You have a dark sense of humor sometimes, Michael Palin.
Well, no, I have to say this was very much in the spirit of Graham Chapman himself, when the darkest humor I know, and he was the 1 down. He would have loved it, actually. But we do have a dark sense of humor. I mean, that's the way Python works, really. We're always kind of joking about each other and being rude about each other. We're actually quite good friends. We get on very, very well. But the Python thing is never to be too nice.
Well, you're only, 75 years old now?
Only 75, I know.
Only 75. You've got a long way to go, man.
I know. Well, really? How long?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much.
You're in good health. You're still prodigiously producing material?
No, absolutely. It's only when I look at my passport and I say I was born in 1943 that I realise, hang on, something wrong here. I mean, I feel just exactly the same spirit as I did when we did Python. But it's nice. I've been lucky. I've been able to do sort of so-called serious things and comic things as well. I think the main thing is just to keep your brain working and also keep physically busy. And that's why I enjoy travelling and walking and running and all that sort of thing. And I will do that till I fall over.
I don't think there's anything sad about it. I think it's fabulous. And keep going, okay?
Oh, I will,
keep
okay. Well, we've got to meet another 5 years.
I was just about to say that. You were here 5 years ago. Now today, we'll see you at age 80, okay?
Yeah, Michael, you're 80. And what's the name of your nurse? Yeah.
No, what's the name of your new book, I'll say.
Oh, right.
Or your new documentary, or your new show, or whatever.
Oh, well, thank you.
It's so good of you to make some time for us here at TVO
lovely.
tonight.
Thank you very much.
We remind everybody and are happy to recommend Erebus, 1 ship, 2 epic voyages, and indeed, the greatest naval mystery of all time. Michael Palin, thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.